to be loud, so you probably want to cover your ears, and we're going to get right now.
Head up on his stuff. Yeah. Just think about it. I'm just glad they want some dogs.
Yeah, artillery. Can you get migraine? Put cotton in his ears.
Let's get that dog, you can't. I mean, that dog went crazy.
He went deaf.
They do get real bad for the dog.
What it sounds like, the dog
20 years later,
He just
they put a long wad of cotton out of his head. You can hear all right then. Didn't say how long in years, you know. Boy, why is it deaf? You would think you could take that much with your head, would you?
Not too late.
It'll rattle your ears. You better believe it.
We ready now. They are a little loud.
Just a little bit. I'm not quite as loud as I thought they'd be.
These two artillery pieces, probably, if you look vastly different from one another. Definitely a whole lot different in size. But you know what? The funny thing about it is they both shoot the same size ammunition right here. This is a 12-pound solid shot. Both of these cannons are classified as 12-pounders, meaning they're smoothbore guns that fire a round shot like this one right here. 12 pounds. They both have the same bore diameter, even though one gun is much smaller than the other. Aside from firing solid shot, they can also fire explosive shell, and they can also fire anti-personnel rounds such as grape shot or canister shot. The mountain rifle here on the right was a weapon that was developed during the time of the war with Mexico in the 1840s, 20 years before the Civil War. It was designed to be used in rugged terrain, mountainous terrain. It could be easily moved about the battlefield. It could also be taken apart and carried on 2 horses or 2 mules. So it was a very light, mobile piece that could get around real easily. And there were still plenty of them around during the time of the Civil War. The big gun here on the left is the Model 1857 12-pounder. Model 1857 was one of the most common pieces of artillery used in the Civil War. Both the Union and Confederate had them, and there were a lot of them on the battlefield. This one's made out of bronze. They also made them out of iron as well. Now, both of these weapons are loaded and fired the same way. You've got 5-man crew on the gun plus support personnel in the rear. Probably the easiest way to think about all this is the 2 men up front do all the cleaning and loading, and the 2 men on the back end do the priming and firing. Start with number 1. Number 1 has an implement called a sponge rammer. You see the wet sponge end there. He's going to run that down the cannon barrel between shots. Not necessarily to clean the cannon out, but more so to put out sparks. Because after you fire it, there's going to be sparks and embers left inside the barrel. Back then, their powder charges were made out of cloth bags, linen bags. If you got sparks in that barrel and you put a cloth bag full of gunpowder in there, that's not going to be a good day. That's going to explode. It's going to injure number 1, probably injure some other crew members. You're going to have an accident on your hands. So he's got to make sure he sponges that barrel out real good and puts out those sparks. Then when the ammunition's inserted into the barrel, he's going to flip that over. He's going to use the wooden rammer head, and he's going to ram that ammunition down. The ammunition goes in the muzzle, it's rammed down and seated in the breech. And it's very important that he seat that round firmly in the breech of the gun, because if he does it, you're going to run the risk of misfire. So number 1 is is one of the most important people on the gun crew because he's got to sponge that piece out good, make sure he puts out sparks, and he's got to make sure that ammunition is seated well so that you don't have a misfire. He's assisted by number 2. Number 2 has got an implement called the worm. The worm is used to drag pieces of debris out of the cannon barrel, pieces of the cartridge bags that are left in there after it's fired. We manufacture our blank charges today using aluminum foil. There's going to be some aluminum foil left in that barrel, so you got to use the worm to snag that and drag it out of there before you reload it. And then, when the ammunition is brought forward, number 2 is going to take the ammunition and put it into the barrel for number 1 to ram down. So number 1 and number 2 are working together to clean and load the cannon. Number 3 is really the busiest man on the crew because he's got a role to play in every stage of the process. During the cleaning and loading, you'll see him with his thumb over the back of the cannon there. There's a hole in the back of the cannon called the vent, and he's got a piece of leather over his thumb called thumb stall. You probably noticed the 2 up front were wearing gloves. That's a safety measure. That's to keep them from getting burned because in a combat situation, that barrel's going to get hot. So they're wearing gloves to keep them from getting burned. He's wearing thumb stall to keep his thumb from getting burned. The reason he is closing off the vent during the cleaning and loading procedure is to keep air from getting in the barrel and help put out those sparks. That sponge fits really, really tight, so it creates a vacuum inside the barrel. You close the air supply off the back end by the vent, you don't have air getting in that barrel. It helps put the sparks out. So you'll see the whole time number 1 and number 2 are in there cleaning and loading, he's going to be tending vent. Once that's done, he's going to help the gunner aim the piece. He's going to go to the trail hand spike there at the back of the cannon. He's going to pick it up and he's going to move the trail side to side on the gunner's order to bring the cannon on target. That's how you aim this gun laterally, side to side. Pick up the trail and move it one side or the other to bring it on target. Then he's going to take his vent pick or priming wire, which is a long brass pick, and he's going to run it down the vent and poke a hole in the powder bag. You got to poke a hole in that bag to expose the powder so that it can be detonated, so the charge can be detonated. So you've got your number 3 man doing all kinds of different stuff throughout the whole procedure. Then you've got number 4. Number 4 is the one that actually gets to fire the cannon. You see he's got a lanyard there in his hand. On the end of that lanyard, he's got one of these things right here. It's called a friction primer. Friction primer is a real simple device. Brass tube filled with gunpowder. It's got a wire crimped into the top of it with fulminated mercury in there. And there's a ring on the end of it where you attach the hook from the lanyard. He's going to sit that in the vent. That's going to go in the vent with the lanyard attached to the hook, just like that. Now what happens is, when the gunner gives the command to fire, he's going to pull the lanyard. The wire is going to tear out of there, which is going to spark and fire the primer down through into the charge in the cannon, and the cannon fires. So that's your friction primer. That's what actually fires it. Now if you saw his lanyard there, you see how long that thing is. He wants not to be behind the cannon when it goes off. Because we're firing blank charges today, and the cannons are not recoiling at all. They're not rolling backwards. If you fire that cannon live with full service charge and a ball in it, it's going to recoil about 10 feet. And he doesn't want to be behind it because that cannon weighs over a ton. It's going to run him right over. So you gotta have that lanyard long enough to get him out of the way. Then you got number 5 here. His job is to run the powder and the ammunition up to the gun. He's got his gunner's haversack there. You would have 2 more men here at the box fixing ammunition and putting ammunition in the bag for him. And he's going to take the ammunition forward. He's going to stop at the gunner. The gunner's going to check, make sure he's got the proper kind of ammunition in the bag. And then he's going to take it forward. When he gets up to the front, number 2 man will take the ammunition out of the bag. He does not take the ammunition out of the bag. He simply opens it up and lets the number 2 man get it out of there to be loaded into the cannon. So that's his whole job, is to be going back and forth carrying ammunition up to the gun. Then we've got the gunner. The gunner is in command of the gun, and he's in command of the crew. The gun is only loaded and fired on his command. Nobody else can give those commands except him. And he gets his orders from officers above him. We've got 2 guns out here. In artillery, that's referred to as a section. A battery is 4 guns. So he's going to get his officers from the section commander. I'm going to get my officers from the battery commander on down. And not only does he have to make sure the crew is doing their job and loading and firing that gun properly, but he's also aiming the piece. You saw how he aimed the piece laterally, side to side. He's also got that rear sight called pendulum Haas sight. Sits on the back of the cannon. He lines it up with the post sight on the front, and you see him operate an elevating screw underneath the barrel. That raises and lowers the barrel to increase and decrease your range. So that's how he's aiming that piece. He's got to be the smartest one on the crew. He's got to be able to visually estimate distance to the target. If he's firing an exploding shell, he's got to estimate time of flight to the target so that he can have the fuse set properly to explode when it's supposed to. He's got to figure all this out in his head while the battle's going on, while he's supervising his crew, making sure they're loading and firing and doing all the things they're supposed to be doing. He's got to keep track of all this on the fly, so he's got to be really sharp. He's sort of the man in charge of all this. Everybody on that crew is trained to do every position on that gun. Because obviously in combat you're going to take casualties you need to replace. So everybody on that crew can move to a different position and do every position on that gun and do it effectively. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up one more time. We're going to shoot one more time for you. And then if you have any questions, we're glad to answer questions. And once the guns are secure, you'll be able to come in and take a closer look if you want to. We're going to try a little something here. We're going to try to get them both to go off at the exact same time. We did it twice in a row yesterday, which is unheard of. See if we can do it one more time.
I'm trying to different, man.
That is very easy with no flat stone. They're all this live and there's a turtle right there on the wall inside and knocked out. They're going to both go around the corner when they shot the lock shot that boat. There go police on the side of the truck. What was this at? This right here. Right here. About 30 years ago.
I'm too ready.
Not yet. Am I not sure?
Gun number 1 ready, sir.